Morning, Cornerstone. Thank you guys. Last week, we took a Sunday off. It was for our anniversary. It was for our 15-year anniversary. We went to Texas, spent a little week there. So we've been going through the book of Nehemiah. And Nehemiah chapter 1, we went through that a couple of weeks ago. And Nehemiah chapter 1, if you guys remember, Nehemiah chapter 1 is basically this. Nehemiah has experienced shame. And by shame, what I mean is Nehemiah is in a different country. He serves a foreign king while his people back in Jerusalem, hundreds if not thousands of miles away, are living in a city which I would consider an apocalyptic state. See, back then, a city had to have walls. You got to have walls to surround the city. Because if you don't have walls, then what you have are gangs. And when you have gangs, they will come through, they'll pillage, they'll destroy, they'll take everything. And for them, their existence is the apocalypse. So Nehemiah is living the good life with a foreign king, the right-hand man. So he is up there while his brothers and sisters are down there in that city trying to survive, and there's this moment of shame for him. See, but the shame wasn't just about the fact that he was living the good life while his brothers and sisters weren't, but it was about he loved his God. His God raised up the people of Israel. The people of Israel were to be the reflection of God, and the people of Israel were about to be wiped out. And that for him was a real source of shame. So if you guys remember, last time we talked about this, I leaned in and I asked us, what is our shame? What's our area of brokenness? What's our area of insecurity? What do we drag around with fear? What do we say, almost like, God, that's a thing I need you to take care of, but I don't even know how to deal with that. What Nehemiah did in that moment when he recognized his source of shame, he did a couple things. First thing he did was he fasted and prayed. When he fasted and prayed, he recognized first that God is the God of love, that he is the person who will take care of me. He also recognized that God listens and that God sees. And then after that, what he recognizes, hey, I've made mistakes. My people have made mistakes. You could argue the reason they are in the place they are right now is because of the mistakes we made. So God, you could abandon us. Ever been there in your prayers like, God, I need you to do something right now, but frankly, I know that I got myself here. You could abandon me. And yet you said, if we came to you, if we repented, and if we laid ourselves down and said, we are deeply sorry, will you save us? You said you would save us. And so that was most of Nehemiah's prayer. But then at the very end, it was almost kind of like, oh, by the way, he says at the end of Nehemiah chapter 1, he basically says, I'm the cupbearer of the king, and I'm going to ask the king for some stuff. God, help me. That one line. He didn't spend most of his prayer asking for anything. He spent most of his prayer putting himself before God and opening up who he was. And at the very end, it's like, God, help me with the king, that one-liner. Remember at the end, I asked you guys to close your eyes and say, what is my one line? What's the thing that I want God to do most of all? I don't know if you guys remember that one-liner. Maybe you weren't here a couple of weeks ago, but you might have the one-liner right now. You might have the thing right now where you're in this moment of shame, you're in a moment of fear, you don't know what God's going to do, and you have this one line, oh, God, help me. So, it's my 15-year anniversary, and Jenny and I did the kind of things you do around your 15-year anniversary, and we watched our wedding video. I was not ready for that. You sit down, and I think it was about a month ago, and we put it in, and it was a DVD, and we pressed play, and we watched the whole thing take place. Everything from the interviews in the beginning, because they always interview the groom and the bride. The interviews in the beginning, to the procession coming up, to standing there, and then to giving of the ring, the exchanging of the vows. And I'm just watching this stuff play out. And I got to tell you, I was a little overwhelmed. I was a little taken aback. The first thing was I had an afro back then. And I looked at the screen and I said, Mistake. Now, some people my dad looks great in afros. My dad looks good. I don't look so good in afros. I can never take it back. But the other thing that made me a little nervous and was a little overwhelming was just kind of, thinking about the 15 years since, everything that has transpired since that day at the wedding till now. And looking at Kevin at that time, that was 25-year-old Kevin, looking at Kevin and seeing that Kevin looked like, deer in headlights, not understanding what was going on. So we were done with the video, and I looked at Jenny, and she was just like, oh. She was like at that moment where she was going to start to sing, and the woodland creatures would gather around her, and happiness and joy. And she looked at me, and she said, that was beautiful. I'm like, oh, what have I done? But here's the thing that really overwhelmed me. See, I didn't realize at the time that I was freaking out. When I was interviewed, because they interview the bride and the groom, right? When I was interviewed, they asked us to say a few words to your future someone. And Jenny's like, hey, babe, you're the one for me. We're going places. And I was like, hi, baby. And what I realized, and I've understood over the last 15 years, I was in over my head. I was overwhelmed. And it was not just the fact that I was this young man about to get married and all the responsibilities of marriage, but it was really about I had experienced family growing up. And family growing up was not always a positive experience for me. And I was about to take all of those experiences, the good and the bad, and transfer it over to this marriage relationship. I was overwhelmed. My heart was confused. It was out of sorts. It didn't know what to do with the information in front of it. There, on my wedding day, it didn't quite understand how to sort all this out. Now, this is the most important part of this message today. When your heart is faced with whatever it's faced with, a moment of pain, a moment of insecurity, a moment of anger, whatever it is, the ability to respond and sort out what is in front of you is everything in your spiritual walk. And if you don't learn how to sort it out, that's when it falls apart. I'm going to tell you right now, the times that our marriage has flourished is when I knew how to respond by my heart and in front of God. And the times that my marriage did not flourish is when my heart did not know how to respond. Nehemiah is a master at this. He deals with this shame, he deals with this pain, deals with this brokenness, and he knows exactly how to respond. We saw it in chapter 1, but today we're going to see it also in chapter 2. Nehemiah is going to take this moment of hurt and shame, and he's going to know how to just turn it around and bring it before a king. And by the end of it, the king gives Nehemiah everything he wants. So turn with me to Nehemiah chapter 2. The words will not be on the flat screen today, but there is a Bible in front of you, a blue Bible. Nehemiah chapter 2 is on page 751. Nehemiah chapter 2. Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 1. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, I took up the wine and gave it to the king. So when wine was before him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. Many scholars believe, because if you guys remember, Nehemiah's job as a Jewish person is he was the cupbearer of the king. He would sip the wine first, make sure it wasn't poisoned, and then he would give it to the king. Well, many scholars believe that what's happening right here is it's a party, right? The wine's a-flowing. And so his job is to come over and give the king some wine as part of this party. So now Nehemiah has all this stuff in the back of his mind, all of his fear about his family and his countrymen. And he walks up to the king and he hands the king the wine. Now it says, now I had not been sad in his presence. Well, what does that mean? It means that Nehemiah had been dealing with things. His heart had been broken about his countrymen, his family, but he had locked it down. He hadn't let it out. He didn't want anyone to know while he was fasting and praying. So he had not been sad. So what seems to happen here is he was not sad up till this point. Nehemiah seems to make a decision to be sad. He seems to make a decision to let the pain show. In verse 2, and the king said to me, why is your face sad, seeing you are not sick? This is nothing but sadness of the heart. This is nothing but sadness of the heart. So King Artaxerxes recognizes that you've never been sad before me. You've always been happy. You've always been smiling. You've always had a good disposition. But today, you're not happy. And it's more that you're not happy. There's something that's going on deep down inside. So he's saying, what is wrong? What we're going to see here, what we saw in chapter 1 and we're going to begin to see here in chapter 2, is that Nehemiah is going to do something that is hard for, I would say, a number of us. Something happens. I don't know what the thing is. I don't know what you're dealing with. But your heart is broken. And you walk into the room and someone says, how are you doing? And you say, I'm great. But you're not great. You say, I'm fine, but I'm not fine. You say, I'm doing all right, but you're not doing all right. The truth is you usually take, as much like myself, you usually take whatever's going on and you lock it down, like Nehemiah has done for a while. My orthodontist has prescribed me twice a bite guard. Y'all know what a bite guard is, right? And at night, you grind your teeth, and so you have to wear a bite guard so you don't grind your teeth away. Well, for me, that's how I deal with my stress. That's how I deal with my pain. That's how I deal with my frustration, is I just clench my jaws. And it's not just at night, by the way. I do it during the day. It gets so bad, I've clenched my jaws so hard that I've given myself a migraine twice. A couple of times I've come to church that I've had a migraine. It's probably because I was clenching my jaws. You see, when I'm dealing with any kind of stress, or I'm dealing with any kind of issue, or I'm dealing with any kind of conflict in my life, I lock it down. I'm not going to let that out. I'm going to grind my emotion and my hurt in between my teeth. And I just smile and grin. I just, oh, how you doing, man? How you doing? And I've recognized more times than not that I tend to take whatever's going on and I lock it down and I don't do anything good with it. So Nehemiah makes the decision that he's going to take whatever he's been experiencing and he's going to let it out, because he knows what? He's got to ask the king for what? He's got to ask the king for something. And if you're going to ask whoever you need to ask, you got to ask with this. With your heart. So many times I've seen someone want something either from God or from man. They will walk up like a robot, ask for a thing that they do not get it, and they say, why did I not ask for it? Because you didn't take the thing that was beating in here, the true pain, the true hurt, the true sorrow. You didn't take that and put it out there. Guys, when you pray with your heart. So many times I don't pray with my heart, I pray with my head. So many times I ask for something with my head, not my heart. When we're about to ask for the big stuff, you gotta pray with this, because this is what God hears. So we see that there's this moment where he's decided that he's going to ask, or that he is going to let the pain out. But then the next line is really interesting. It says, in response to his question, then I was very much afraid. I was afraid. Now, Nehemiah has had a long time to work through this, to process this, to prepare himself for this, to go before the king. He's been praying to God. He's been fasting. He shouldn't be afraid. He should be ready. Why is he afraid? Some of this could just be human nature. You all have that moment when you've locked down a feeling or a thing you're struggling with, and you finally, there's this moment of truth, and you're about to say it, and you're like, oh, should I say it? And you got that kind of like, that moment of fear. That could be what's happening here with Nehemiah. He's like, I don't know if I want to send this out there. It could be that because what he says next will define what happens to his people, he wants to make sure he gets it right. He wants to make sure he says it right. It could be that he knows how a Persian king responds to certain things. You see, Nehemiah is not supposed to be sad. Professor Lang, who's a biblical scholar, points out this. Your job, if there's a Persian king, and you're a cupbearer or you're in the court or whatever, if the king is happy, guess what? You need to be happy. If the king is sad, you need to be sad. If the king is angry, you need to be angry. Whatever the king's emotional state, that's where you should be. If the king is happy and you're depressed and poor me, guess what? He's probably going to kill you. And he was probably afraid because Nehemiah knows of the different ways that a king could kill one of his subjects. One particular way that leaders have dealt with their subjects is they've ripped their skin off and made a chair into them. Another way they've dealt with their subjects is to pour hot gold down their mouth. Another way to deal with their subjects is the three deaths. First, they flail you alive, but then they make you healthy again, and then they beat you up, and then they make you healthy again, and then they crucify you. So when Nehemiah says, or when it says Nehemiah, he was very much afraid, that might have been what he was thinking about. My first thought is this. Some of you guys want to let whatever the thing is out and bring it before whoever needs to hear it. You have this moment of fear, like, should I do this? I don't know. This is impossible. I can't say this. Well, you're probably not going up against what Nehemiah was going up. And if Nehemiah is able to confess with the fear that this guy could turn his skin into a couch, then you might be able to have the courage to say the words you need to say. So he was very much afraid. But in his fear, he spoke. And what he says, he said to the king, "Let the king live forever. Why should not my face be sad when the city, the place of my father's graves, lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire?" Then the king said to me, "What are you requesting?" So he gets it. He's saying, why should I not be sad? Because everything that means something to me, do you hear the heart talk right now? He's being dead honest. He's like, why should anyone be happy when the people I love the most are experiencing the worst things in their life? There's no reason for me to be happy. So he lets his heart out. But the king gets what he's trying to do here. The king understands there's more than just sharing his feelings. The king knows that Nehemiah wants something from him. And so the king says it. What are you requesting? What do you want? What do you need? Because I think you need something here. Now I love this next line. So I prayed to the God of heaven. So what's happening here? Nehemiah has prepared himself. Sounds like he has some kind of a plan. He's coming before the king. He's about to ask the king for something. He's going to petition the king. To petition the king, we'll see in a minute, with supplies, with political protection, with a number of things. He's about to do that. But before he even petitions the king, what does he do? He petitions God. Because he knows at the end of the day, this petition is not about the king, it's about God. Who's going to change that king's mind? Who's going to make that king understand his heart and his brokenness? Who's going to actually do something about the moment they're in right now? It is not King Artaxerxes, it is the God of heaven. And so when you are in that place and you're in that moment and you're about to say whatever you need to say, maybe it's simply to a spouse. It's like, hey, spouse, I'm going to ask you to address something that is not right in our marriage. Maybe it's a boss. Maybe it's whatever the list is. When you're about to do that, you're about to say those words, the first thing you should do is petition the true king. This is what I love about this too. We have to recognize what's going on here in this petition. This is not like, and it can be for some of us, this is not like he's been thinking about this for a very long time. And oh, by the way, I think I'll throw up a word to God and maybe he'll back me up on this. This petition, this moment of prayer to God is backed by 4 months of praying and fasting. First thing I want to tell you guys is if you're going to go and do the big ask, make sure that you're backed up with 4 months of praying and asking the one who can truly take care of you and provide. But the second thing I want to point out here is that all that he is bringing before this king is what God has already sorted out in his heart. And we'll get to that in a moment. So he prays with his heart. He petitions the king with his heart. But now he plans with his head. Verse 5, and it said, and I said to the king, and this is great how he handles this. And then I said to the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's graves, that I may rebuild it. So essentially what's happened here is that he was sad. Nehemiah is sad. King's like, why are you so sad? What's going on? And Nehemiah takes a breath, prays to God, and then he pulls out this shopping list. He says, if it pleases the king, your servant has found favor in your sight, that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's graves, that I may rebuild it. So send me to Judah. And the king said to me, how long will you be gone? And he told him how long I'll be gone. Then he says, if it pleases the king, let letters be given to me, to the governors of the province beyond the river. So now he knows he needs letters, that they may let me pass through until I come to Judah, and a letter to Asaph. So now he knows he needs letters for a number of people. And the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the fortress of the temple. So now he's thinking about the temple. Then he says, and for the wall of the city. So now he's thought about the city. And he says, and for the house, it's kind of like, since it's going well, and for the house that I shall occupy, please. It seems a little suspicious. And scholars have pointed out, I mean, you guys have to imagine, there's this king, or there's a Nehemiah, he steps up to the king, he's like, man, I'm having a rough day. He's like, why are you having a rough day? He said, well, my people, they've been, abandoned. Well, what can I do about it? Well, glad you mentioned. Now think of like a precocious 7-8-year-old. Walks up to you. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, parents, but they walk up to you. And it was a boy, and he walks up and he says, I just feel like life's not worth living. Okay, what's going on? I need a puppy. I need a puppy. You're like, well, that's fine. If you want a puppy, you can get a puppy. And like, yeah, really? Yeah, well, maybe in a couple weeks we'll go check out puppies. And he says something like, well, I'm glad you mentioned it. That is not a puppy. Glad you mentioned it. Here's the name of a breeder in Demont. He has 52 5-star reviews in Yelp. He is in business for 13 years. Exclusively breeds Golden Labradors. He's 8 weeks old, already spayed, comes from a line of healthy dogs. And her name is Molly. Jim told me that he'd already put her on layaway. We can pick her up tomorrow on the way to Grandma's. And you're like, have I just been played? But you're getting the puppy. You're getting the puppy. So what's happened in this moment? Nehemiah has not abandoned his head. He's not abandoned his mind. He has prayed with his heart. He has brought the truth of his heart to both God and man, but he has not abandoned his mind. He has brought his mind to the situation. Sometimes, let's be honest, sometimes when we think about Christians and Christianity, we think, oh, they're all heart, but they're no head. Right? They're all heart, but they're no mind. That is not what Nehemiah does. What Nehemiah does, and this is so important, is Nehemiah lays down the most important foundation you have to lay down ever before you make plans. He prays, and he prays for months about it. And then the plan begins to percolate. That's how it works. And as I was thinking about this, what I realized is we get in trouble. We get in trouble because we tend to do the opposite. We plan with our heart and we pray with our mind. We plan with our heart and we pray with our mind. What I mean is this: when you plan with your heart, that president in the HOA, the guy is an idiot. He's always writing us letters about weeds. And this neighbor over here has like 4 tractors in his front lawn, and he's writing us about weeds. I'm going to call everyone, and we're going to get this guy booted out, and we're going to hold elections. And you're just spewing anger and bitterness. That is planning with your heart. That boss, I'm tired of him. I'm quitting. That's planning with your heart. Guys, too many times, I've seen 2 people get a divorce, and their plans always come from their heart, from their pain, from their anger. And then at the very end, they pray with their mind. Oh, by the way, God, help me get custody. I want full custody. By the way, God, just help me with this meeting when we're going to try to vote this guy out. That's the planning with your mind. No heart, all mind. And I tell you, I've done it more times than I care to admit. But what he does in this period of 4 months is he works with his heart. He and God wrestles with their heart. And when they're ready, he comes up with the plan. He shows it to the king. And the king, by the way, at the end of this chapter, will sign off. Guys, it's a heart problem we have. And the heart is where we have to start. And prayer is what has to be mixed in there with our heart. It is not your plans. It is not the situation you're dealing with. It's not the person you're angry with. It is your heart, and it's your prayer coming together. This is a revelation for me, especially over the last couple of years. It's your heart, and it's your prayer, and it's exposing to God and to man where you're at. So many of us have gone out and tried to do things, and we prayed, and because God told us to pray, we thought it would work out because we thought we had a good plan and whatever, and it falls flat. And I'll tell you what happens is when you take your true desire and you put it before God, he will actually give you the plan. I'm going to close with a story. And the story comes from pastor and author Kent Hughes. He tells the story. Several years ago, one of my wife's friends took a missionary furlough with her husband and family after an unusually tiring stint of service. She had been looking forward to this time with great anticipation. For the first time, she was going to have a place of her own, a new large townhouse-styled apartment with a patio. So if you're a missionary and you're living in the sticks, you're down in South America, life's been rough, and you come home back to the States to a nice house with air conditioning and heating and carpet, and she is looking forward to it. She's very creative and made the patio the focus for decoration. After a few months, some new neighbors moved in. The word to describe them would be coarse. There was loud music day and night, along with a constant flow of obscenities. They urinated in the front yard in broad daylight. They totally disrupted her peace. She could see nothing good in them. And to appreciate this, you guys ever just needed a vacation? Ever just need a couple weeks off, couple months, just an afternoon, and it's like that moment life falls apart. She's been on the mission field probably for decades, and she just needs a little me time. She asked the Lord to help her be more loving, but all she got back from her neighbors was disgust and rejection. The crisis came when she returned home to discover that her neighbors' children had sprayed orange paint all over her patio, the walls, the floors, everything. She was distraught and furious, she tried to pray, but found herself crying out, I cannot love them, I hate them. Now I'm going to tell you, that was probably the most honest and the most heartfelt prayer she had had the entire time. It wasn't just to say, oh, God, just help me love them. It was, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm struggling with. And I think at that point, God's like, thank you for being honest. And it goes on to say, knowing she had to deal with the sin in her heart, she began to converse with the Lord in her inner being, and a scripture came to mind, and beyond all these things, put on love, which is the perfect bond of unity. In her heart, she questioned, Lord. Now, in her heart, she questioned, Lord, how do I put on love? The only way she could picture it was like putting on a coat. So that is what she determined to do. She chose to wrap herself in the love of God. As a result, she began to experience a deeper life of Christ within her. She made a list of what she would do if she really loved her exasperating neighbors, then did what she had listed. She baked cookies. She offered to babysit for free. She invited the mother over for coffee. And the most beautiful thing happened. She began to know and understand them. She began to see that they were living under tremendous pressure. So after she's worked her heart out, she comes up with this plan. She makes this list of how she can love them. She began to love her enemies. She did good to them. She lent to them without expecting anything back. The day came when they moved, and she wept. An unnatural, unconventional love, and captured her heart, a supernatural love, the love of Jesus. That's how it happens. You pray with your heart and you plan with your head. You make room for God. You get honest with him. You tell him, I can't stand him. I can't stand him. Can't stand my husband, can't stand my wife, can't stand my children. Can't stand myself, whatever it is. You get it out there and you deal with it, and you deal with it for a long time. And what begins to happen is God's true plan comes out. And then you will approach the King with confidence, because you know that this plan that you have was given to you honestly and through the love of Jesus.